Please give a warm welcome to our next guest speaker, the Hon Dr David Clark, Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Minister for the Digital Economy and Communications and Member of Parliament. The Hon Dr David Clark was first elected as the Labour Member of Parliament for Dunedin North in 2011. One of the key reasons David stood for Parliament was because he was concerned about the growing gap between rich and poor, which he sees as limiting New Zealand's social and economic potential. He believes we can and must achieve a fairer society where everyone has an opportunity to succeed. David will be speaking on digital payments ecosystem and their future within the digital economy. We look forward to hearing more about the Hon Dr Clark's vision for the digital strategy for Aotearoa and what the digital payments ecosystem can contribute to achieving that aspiration, and also the Minister's policy and legislative areas of his portfolio that impact on the payments industry. Please, would you put your hands together for Minister Clark?
Ngā mana, ngā reo, ngā kārangatanga maha, otoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ki ngā mana whenua, ko Ngāti Whātua o Raki, anu nei aku mihi ki a koutou. Noku tuhanarei ki haere mai ki te whakanuia tēnei huihuinga whakahirihira. Nō reira, ngā manaakitanga, ki runga I a tātou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā, tātou katoa. Well, can I thank everyone who has spoken already. There's a lot of ground actually being covered, even amongst the welcomes to this prestigious and I think much anticipated conference. It's great to actually be all together in one place again after such a long interruption through COVID. I want to thank Steve, you and your team for putting this conference on and for inviting me here to speak. And I want to acknowledge also our kaumātua, John Retimana, for the response and acknowledging the fact that banks, we do want them to be profitable. I'm with you on that. The Minister of Finance would have me say, I'm sure in response, he does not want to be bailing out any banks. And our Prime Minister has, though, challenged banks to consider their social licence as they make record profits in a time when people really are feeling the cost of living. And I think that's a fair challenge. I was actually speaking at a friend's funeral the other day. I'm a Presbyterian minister when I wear another hat, and I don't preach very often these days, but it was a dear friend. And I was preaching on Zacchaeus. It was the biblical text that was laid down for the week, who was the chief tax collector. And actually, he was the hero of the story because he did the right thing. He made sure he did right by everybody, even though he wasn't a popular character at all by any stretch, which is hammered home in that particular biblical text. He's even caricatured as being particularly short, as though that might be a sin against him. And obviously a tax collector. I was mindful that in the audience at this funeral was New Zealand's chief tax collector, who I took the opportunity of apologising to in advance. But I think it highlights, there's a role for social responsibility, but our system does also expect us to function in a certain way in a capitalist society. So I want to also celebrate the theme here. We've, in our introductions, heard about the importance of taking stock, of looking forward, looking at the big picture and looking what the opportunities are for the payments community. And I note the kaumātua who provided the welcome, looked forward to his fishing trip today. We all have different objectives for our days, and I know all of you in this community are looking forward to thinking differently, stretching our minds as to how we can take the payments community forward. So I plan to use my time today to lay out what I see as the task ahead, the strategy for achieving it, and how I see the payments community contributing. And I also want to take the opportunity to update on several work streams that will impact the payments industry. We are living in a time of great change. Over the last 3 years, we've seen the pandemic alter our way of life. Steve spoke to that. We all know that not only are we paying our bills online, as we all have, most of us, not only are we looking to do some of our retail information gathering online, but we're earning, we're learning, and we're socialising much more these days online. Our way of life has changed. We're feeling the ripple effects of a complex and interconnected supply chain that is our global trade network, the international conflicts in the Ukraine, the energy crisis, those supply chain disruptions I mentioned, turbulent economic conditions. We're feeling all of that here in New Zealand. And we're seeing and continuing to experience the impacts of climate change. Meanwhile, the ever-increasing pace of technological innovation marches on, revolutionising our lives and promising to make the next 10 years or so perhaps the time of biggest change and most interest in that space. So they are uncertain times, but with that comes opportunity. The change we know that we'll see will be the platform for what comes after it. It is something we need to engage with. And for many of us in the room, our biggest role will be helping to navigate that ever-winding path of increasing digitalisation, particularly with regards to the digital economy. Fortunately, we now have a strategic framework to guide us on that journey, and I want to say a little bit about the digital strategy which was published in September and its supporting action plan. The strategy provides us with an overarching framework for how we want our digital future to look in New Zealand and how we can progress towards that. It sets out a vision to aspire to, and that's described in the strategy as a future where our people, communities, economy and environment are flourishing and prosperous in the digital era. I do want to take a moment to thank those of you in this room, and I know there will be some who have contributed to that digital strategy. It was widely consulted on, and the feedback was really helpful in shaping the final strategy. That final strategy is framed around the three pillars that were canvassed in the draft documents that were circulated in that feedback, that request for feedback, and they're supported by specific goals and measures that will track our progress. Now, the first of those three pillars is mahi tika, or trust. We want New Zealanders to feel safe and empowered in online environments. We know that trust is key, and we want organisations to design and apply digital technologies and data in fair, culturally appropriate and trustworthy ways. We want for our digital and data infrastructures to remain fit for purpose and secure. Trust is essential. It's very hard to build and very easy to lose. And we've just got to keep reminding ourselves that people will embrace a digital future if they feel safe and secure when they engage with the technologies that we have in front of us. And in order to feel safe, they've got to know that these technologies, the ways in which these technologies are created, how they're intended to be used, and how they're governed. The second pillar in the digital strategy is mahi tahi, or inclusion. We want New Zealanders to have the tools, skills and confidence to participate in an increasingly digital society, and we want our digital infrastructure, content and services to meet people's diverse needs. Now, digital inclusion can open new ways to live with independence and dignity. We've also got to recognise that some people don't want to engage digitally or online, and part of that vision is to make sure that we have services accessible in other ways. The third pillar is mahi ake, or growth. We want our businesses and organisations to innovate and increase productivity using digital technologies and data, and we want a thriving, fast-growing and inclusive tech sector. The digital technology sector contributed an estimated $7.4 billion to the New Zealand economy alone in 2020, and in our digital strategy, the vision is for the digital economy to grow and be on a path to being New Zealand's largest export earner. As all of you know very well in this room, all New Zealand businesses and organisations can build their digital capability and reap the rewards through greater use of digital tools and services. The digital strategy is intended as a living strategy that will continue to evolve and change with technology, helping us to adapt to new issues and opportunities, and there'll be a refresh of that action plan year by year. Now, I want to say a couple of things about expectations for industry. It's clear that the international payments industry is evolving rapidly, both in consumer expectations and in the technology underpinning payment systems. I was encouraged by the forward thinking and aspiration laid out in Payments New Zealand's Payments Modernisation Plan. It is the kind of thinking that will allow this country to be well positioned in a rapidly changing landscape. I also agree with the sentiment that a leading payment system is one of the key preconditions for becoming a world-class digital nation and a flourishing and prosperous Aotearoa New Zealand. So I'll be looking to Payments New Zealand to provide industry leadership in driving our payments ecosystem forward. However, I recognise it is not only up to the innovators in the industry to determine the future direction of payments. Policymakers and regulators also play a crucial role. The regulatory landscape is changing in ways I expect will help generate trust and facilitate innovation, competition and economic growth, all of which, I trust, will enable Payments New Zealand to execute its vision of New Zealand having the world's most progressive payments system while making sure payments are simple and secure for Kiwis. And to close out my speech, I'd like to update you on 3 key pieces of work the government's undertaking that will impact the payments industry. The first is the Digital Identity Services Trust Framework Bill, which I consider a key initiative for achieving our vision for the digital strategy. I'm hoping that may come up in the House again this week. As services increasingly move online, it's more important than ever that people can prove who they are online in a trusted, safe and consistent way. The Digital Identity Services Trust Framework Bill introduces a new regulatory framework that will establish standards for the provision of secure digital identity services. And ultimately, that's about making sure people have control over their own data, including what they choose to share about themselves and who they choose to share it with. And it's anticipated that that will increase consumer confidence in digital identity services, as well as fostering innovation in the tech industry and more broadly. The trust framework will set out requirements which must be met by digital identity service providers if they wish to become accredited. Consumers will be able to see if a provider is accredited based on a trust mark displayed against the service. The trust framework will not create a central repository or database to store people and organisations' information. The rules and regulation will not allow for the integration of data from multiple sources into a single location. The proposed new system will be decentralised. Ultimately, the trust framework is designed for privacy. Personal information will not be accessible or shared without a person's consent. Information will only be stored for as long as it is needed, and it will be securely encrypted both while it's stored and when it is in use. The rules will also explicitly prohibit the selling of information to third parties. The trust framework will provide digital identity specific rules and regulations, but the existing safeguards of the Privacy Act will continue to apply to the trust framework as well. And I assume and expect that the payments community will be particularly interested in the role of digital wallets under the trust framework. People will be able to choose digital wallets to store their digital credentials. These wallets will become important tools for enabling us to securely store and share information, which may include information for electronic payments. I look forward to sharing more about that bill's progress, and as I say, I hope it will come up in the Parliament this week, but I look forward to sharing more about its progress in due course. The second piece of work of the 3 that I wanted to speak to before I close is an update on the Retail Payment Systems Act, which was passed in Parliament in May this year. In the short term, that's focused on a well-known problem, reducing interchange fees. in the Visa and MasterCard networks, particularly as they're passed on to smaller merchants. In the long term, I believe the Retail Payment Systems Act could be instrumental in promoting and guiding technological progress in the interests of merchants and consumers. Importantly, this act is designed to regulate a moving target. I expect the system to continue to evolve, to embrace new technologies and accommodate changing consumer preferences. Now, the Act recognises this by providing the means to regulate other payment networks in the future through a range of flexible tools. Any technical questions on that, please feel free to approach John Small, who's sitting over here a little to the right. The third and final key piece of work I wish to update you on before I close is establishing a legislative framework for a consumer data right. Consumers really should be in the driver's seat when it comes to how their personal information is used by third parties. A consumer data right is a mechanism that requires data holders such as banks and electricity retailers to safely and securely share data with third parties like fintech companies, for example. This means New Zealanders gain access to a wider range of products and services that better meet their needs. Since we agreed to establish a consumer data right at an event hosted by ASB some time ago, work has been undertaken on the details of how this framework would work in practice. That's included agreement on the institutional arrangements, cost recovery, compliance, enforcement, and consumer redress functions of the regime. Now, I don't have an announcement to make today on which sector will be designated first. The dance of the Seven Veils will continue a little longer, but I do look forward to being able to update you very soon on where we have landed on that. So to close, and I believe we have a time for questions, which will I'm sure will be the most interesting part. I'd like to thank you once again for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I wish you all the very best for the next 2 days at the conference, for the discussions that you'll have around reframing the future, and I hope they prove useful in advancing the economic outcomes that we want for all New Zealanders in the years to come. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā, tātou katoa. Kia ora koutou.